But when I found myself without the answer is always more glory.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Cast of Kings, a Decoding TV podcast about the HBO original series, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I'm David Chen, and I haven't read A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms by George R. R. Martin, and typically this would be when Kim Renfro introduces herself and says that she has read the books. Unfortunately, Kim could not make it for this episode. She had to take some time off to deal with a personal matter, but I am very grateful to have an awesome replacement. She is the creator of the Jessie Gender YouTube channel, and by the way, you should totally check out her latest video essay, which involves Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. It's called Cynical Art is Killing Our Ability to Imagine Hopeful Futures. Check it out. Anyway, Jessie Earl, welcome back to A Cast of Kings.
Hi, thank you for having me. I am very excited to be here, and I'm hoping I can live up to Kim's wonderful expertise on Game of Thrones, because she is wonderful. So, I'm glad to be here.
We're so grateful to have you, Jessie. Let's just get right into it. Jessie Earl, let's talk about A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, episode 4, entitled Seven. We're going to discuss what exactly that title means. But first, let's just share overall thoughts on the episode. Jessie, what'd you think of episode 4, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms?
I loved this one. I mean, I've been loving the whole season because
Yes.
I haven't been on the show talking about every episode with y'all. But this whole season has been wonderful and amazing and super sweet. And I liked that this episode has this sense of dread kind of going throughout the whole thing that feels really earned compared to the rest of the season, which has been fairly heartwarming, at least for Game of Thrones, at least in Game of Thrones terms. And this is the first episode that really you feel sort of the dark moment, and it really builds up around Dunk sort of realizing that he's just in a terrible situation. He doesn't really feel like he has any way out, and it without getting into spoilers just yet, I think it just pays off so well at the end of the episode where you're like, oh yeah, let's go, let's do this thing.
Yeah.
And it's just this wonderful arc of the episode, and there's so many really great payoff scenes throughout this. I think this episode was just fantastic.
I have to say I agree. I mean, look, when you're watching an episode like this, your mind kind of starts doing the episode length math.
Yeah.
Okay, are they actually going to get to the big event this episode? And they don't get to the big event this episode, and I was a little bit bummed about that. But the way that they lead into it is so good, and it hasn't paid off yet, but like the quote unquote payoff of what happens at the end of this episode, I feel is pretty well set up from the rest of the show, and the music, and just this has one of the best endings,
yes,
of any Game of Thrones related episode I have ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, like, when I watched this episode, I literally had to like get up and walk around my house because I was just so pumped. I just needed to like work off energy. Like, I just want to watch the next episode right now. You know, you just have you get those TV episodes, those movies where you're just like, oh man, I have so much energy right now.
I went back and rewatched the end of the episode like 5 or 6 times, all the way through the end of the credits, just to like feel that feeling again, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I like, even though we don't get to the thing, I still love the episode. Now, who knows? Maybe next week will disappoint us in some way. I don't know. I doubt it. But so far, every episode of this show has felt like a worthy use of time, and I thought this one was no different. So let's get into what actually happened this episode, Jessie. At the beginning of the episode, Egg meets Dunk in jail, and by the way, he's dressed up as a little Targaryen. He has a little cute Targaryen outfit on now.
I love that
cute outfit on now.
It doesn't fit him on it weirdly. And I say this in a good way. It feels like it doesn't like match who he is really well, and I like that. Yeah.
But yeah, Egg apologizes for deceiving Dunk, but Dunk is not very happy. Egg explains that he was supposed to be a squire for Daeron, his brother, but Daeron didn't want to be part of the tournament. So Egg lied to Dunk because he just really wanted to be a squire, and it was worth lying to Dunk in order to do that. So anyway, Egg brings Dunk to Baelor. Baelor and Dunk discuss the situation. It becomes clear that Daeron lied and told everyone that Dunk had kidnapped Egg, thus endangering him. Thus endangering Dunk further with this lie, but it was to justify Daeron's own activities. Dunk's punishment, if found guilty, is to lose the offending hand that struck Daron, most likely, and probably his foot too, as he kicked him as well.
And you kicked him too, did you not?
I did.
The only way out? Trial by combat. Okay, before we get to the trial by combat, which we will momentarily, any thoughts on these opening scenes? We're finally seeing Egg and Dunk speak under true terms. Like, they now know who each other really are. And I think it's interesting. You're seeing a whole different side of Egg, a.k.a. Aegon Targaryen, a.k.a. the same name as 4 other rulers of Westeros.
Yeah, what I liked about that opening scene is the 2 actors. You can clearly see they've built up a really good chemistry. I've been listening to the official Game of Thrones podcast, and they interviewed both actors at different times, and they've talked about how they literally would spend time outside of the show, like going to arcades and such, and like having fun. And it's like, oh,
Amazing.
they are really Dunk and Egg in real life. and I like the payoff in this scene because you can really see the hurt that both of them have. And you do see, I think for the first time really, Dunk being the kind of adult in the room. Like, he's been play acting at the adults at different points throughout the season, where he's like tried to live up to being the knight that he's supposed to be for his squire, that his own his own knight was to him. But here you really get to see, like, kind of reprimanding the kid, which was such an interesting dynamic, because especially since, as we mentioned, he's wearing the Targaryen outfit now. But now this is Dunk being even more like, no, you were wrong, you hurt me. Like, it was just an interesting evolution of their dynamic in a really good way. And you see how Egg is really like a child being like, I didn't mean to hurt you, and he did.
Yeah. Well, also Dunk seemingly still not afraid of chastising Targaryens. He has not yet learned the lesson yet, right?
Exactly.
But yeah.
He doesn't learn that multiple times throughout this episode. Like, my boy, maybe don't touch Targaryens anymore.
So Dunk confronts Arion and invokes the right of trial by combat.
Trial by combat.
And the idea is that they can fight each other, or their champions can fight each other to determine who is right or wrong. This is based. I think this is based off of a real life phenomenon from our time period.
We've seen it a few times in Game of Thrones as well.
Yes.
If you think back, the 2 major ones are when Tyrion Lannister invoked it twice. First in season 1 at the Eyrie, and then the second one when he did it when he was on trial for the death of Joffrey. I think in season 3 or 4, I forget which season that was. One of those 2.
Right, that guy really liked the trial by combat as an option.
He really did. He got poor Pedro Pascal killed.
Yeah. But Arion refuses, instead invoking a trial of 7 is what it's called, I believe. Trial of 7, an Andal practice that requires 7 men to face off against 7 men. This was an interesting scene because I think for most people, Trial of 7 is a new concept. Like, most people watching this who haven't read the books probably don't know about what Trial of 7 is. Jessie Earl, can you help us understand a little bit more what the Trial of 7 is in the books? And also, is Arion invoking this? Is that like considered honorable, disgraceful, just plain weird? What are your thoughts on Trial of 7 as a phenomenon?
Yeah, him invoking it, I think, is more just plain weird. I think the intention, and it kind of is implied in the book and is implied here as well, is that him doing that is kind of him doing 2 things.
A trial of 7.
That is my right, I do believe.
One, it's him, I think, trying to protect himself, because if he had to do trial by combat, it's just him versus Dunk, and I think he's probably not as confident in his own abilities against Dunk, so doing this is a way to protect himself from that. And then, as we sort of see later on, it kind of comes up at the end of the episode, if Dunk is unable to get 7 people for his side, he's just automatically presumed to be guilty in the eyes of the gods, and is thereby they don't even have to do the combat.
Right. So Arion is trying to win by default, the 2 greatest words of the English language, default. And trying to win without even needing to fight him at all, which is
Exactly.
kind of a bitch ass move, I believe it's called.
Yeah, exactly.
The Game of Thrones
I think
universe.
that's the technical term.
That's the technical term, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is, and they don't really touch upon this in the show, and I know Kim in last week's episode kind of talked about this. What the Trial of Seven is there's the 7 aspects of the one God that Kim mentioned. The father, the mother,
the warrior.
The warrior.
Right?
I think the crone is one of them. There's a bunch of different ones. And the way the Trial of Seven works, theoretically, is that this, by having 7 combatants, that would allow the gods to pick sort of one warrior on each side to sort of bless. So the warrior would bless one warrior on one side, the mother would bless another warrior on the other side, and it would kind of be like a weird vote of the gods of how many warriors they want to bless on either side. And because of that, then it would be, and I think they kind of say this in the show, it would be a more true trial by combat that the gods would be more inclined to like, because they have a more direct say individually in the outcome of the battle, as opposed to
so it's a more
one-on-one.
accurate trial by combat.
Yes.
That's
Which I
all.
think
That's
is
all.
pretty cool.
But you didn't bring up the third thing that Arion was trying to do. He's just trying to get a more accurate read from the
Yeah,
gods.
he was definitely was being very pious in this moment.
Indeed. So, anything else to say about Trial of Seven? Or
No. That's the main thing. I always think the religious implications of it are kind of fun.
So Dunk is told to go seek his champions. And we get a few brief scenes. I'm just going to mention them all at once. But if you have thoughts to say about them, please share.
Please.
But we see a scene where Stefan Fossaway agrees to be one of the champions.
All knights vow to protect the innocent, even edge knights, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about how, the Fossaways have been around long before the kings got here, and we're going to be around long after, and F these guys, we don't need them, and I'm happy to be your champion, even though it could cost him dearly in many ways.
I actually will say that is one of the major changes from the book here, just in terms of his motivation. We were talking before we started recording. I reread this section of the book before we hopped on the recording, and it's so this episode is very 1-to-1 with the book in a lot of ways. And this motivation changes. It's slightly different because Fossaway isn't so directly anti-Targaryen in the book. And we also get a sort of mirroring Raymond Fossaway last episode being very anti-Targaryen.
Right.
And that motivation isn't really in the book. His only motivation in the book for joining Dunk's side is a bit weaker, where he's just like, hey, I saw how Darian's treatment of the puppeteer was horrible, so I'm on your side. And it's not a sort of larger indictment of the Targaryen dynasty that we get here.
Yeah, so I guess the reason for changing it is twofold. Number one, it's a bigger surprise when he turns at the end.
Yes, exactly.
And number two, it does make him out to be like a much more craven, reprehensible individual.
It makes him a much bigger asshole.
Right. Yeah. So, and what do you think of that change? Are you like, I guess the Fossaways are not necessarily like beloved characters, right?
Yeah. So, well, I actually like it. I think it adds a lot of depth to them, and it also kind of gives a little bit of an interesting sentiment to this era of Game of Thrones, in between where we are between like House of the Dragon and the original Game of Thrones show, because we can start to see. I mean, we know that within the next 100 years, we're going to get something like Robert's Rebellion against the Targaryens, that the Targaryens are going to fall, and so this kind of like builds up like, oh, there was a sort of resentment building within the sort of the country against the Targaryens, that was becoming more and more present. And more spoken about, because even in House of the Dragon, you kind of see like people would kind of mumble against the Targaryens, but there wasn't really a super big question of the Targaryens shouldn't be in charge. Whereas here, you're starting to get that sentiment coming up more. So I like that as sort of like a world building aspect. And then it's just it adds a little bit more depth to these the Fossaways, who are in the book. Like Raymond is fairly similar to what he is in the show, but it does flesh them out a little bit more. So
yeah. Darren and Egg pay a visit to the tent that they're in. Egg offers to bring some knights to help fight on Dunk's behalf, and we learn a little bit more about Arion. We learn some stories he's kind of a bit of a monster, which I think we already knew, but nice to have reinforcement for that. Kind of a weird visit, I have to say. Darian, Dunk again threatens Darian again. In this,
my boy, I love you, but please stop.
Stop hitting Targaryens. It's not good for you. But I guess the reason Darian came, as far as I could tell, was to say, hey, sorry I lied, and I'm going to fight you tomorrow, but like I'm not going to pose a threat. So just like give me a little bump on the noggin and don't kill me. Like that's kind of what he's trying to say. Was what I understood.
I'll roll over and play dead is the vibe. Yeah.
Darren also describes one of his dreams and says he is cursed to have dreams that come true.
My dreams are not like yours. Mine come true. An impressive talent for an unimpressive man.
He describes a dream of Dunk and fire and a dead dragon, a great beast with wings so large they could cover this meadow. But you were alive and the dragon was dead. That's what he says. And then Dunk says, "Did I kill it?" And he says, "That I cannot say." Now, Jesse, I assume you know what this is referring to. Is that accurate?
Yes, I very much do. And this is in the books too. I know Kim, you two were talking last week about the fortune teller that showed up, which is not in the books at all. And that scene is very clearly alluding to like larger Game of Thrones mythos stuff that's not directly in this story. But this I will say is in the actual short story stuff. I won't spoil what it's talking about or what it means, but this is directly in the book and in the story, and will certainly be illuminated by the end of the season, I presume. So. Okay.
Well, I was going to say maybe you could explicate some of it for us, but
I don't want to go. If I go too into what it's going to be, it would be spoilery for the story. So
okay, all right, appreciate that. Here's a question for you, and tell me if this edges too much into spoiling, or spoiling. But I guess here's what we observe from all the prophecies that get told in the show. Pretty much all of them come true. There's like a few random ones that are kind of mixed, in my opinion.
Yes.
But pretty much all the prophecies in the show come true. And they also come true not in the way that you expect.
Yes.
Right? And do you think that is true of what he's describing here? Like, is it kind of what he's describing is an interesting spin on what actually occurs?
Yes. Okay. I very, very much so. Again, I don't want to go too far into it, but what I will say is once you get to the end of the season, I would actually go back to what this dream means, and I actually think some of the symbolism in it is really interesting for what it's trying to say. And I think that's it. It's actually very cool, and I do really like it. And kind of going to your point too, it is just interesting that the Targaryens are the ones that continually get the dreams.
Yeah,
because it's always the Targaryens. Like we even going House of the Dragon, they sort of added that in, like the Song of Ice and Fire stuff, that prophecy that we sort of get told to Rhaenyra, and how that's sort of been passed down through the Targaryen dynasty. Daenerys in Game of Thrones proper had a bunch of dreams that kind of came true. Right. So it's always Targaryen related. So
yeah. There is a scene where Dunk gets his shield with the new sigil. I have to say, I think it looks very nice.
Yes.
Dunk at first is like, describes it as very funereal and sad, but then the guy who's giving him the shield is saying, nonsense. This tree is alive. It's a summer in this image, and so on. But you described it as very. What was the word you used to describe this episode? Like ominous, or that there's like
full of dread,
full of dread. Yeah. And I really felt that this scene, because I think Dunk is really confronting his mortality, right? Like he thinks he is almost definitely not going to survive this. Literally does not even fully understand the rules.
I don't know what's going on.
Right, and so he does not think he's going to survive. Like he's not going to be able to get 7 nights. If he gets 7 nights, they're not going to be able to fight. Like, or they're going to get killed or whatever. And so he's weeping in this scene because he realizes this is probably the end of his life.
Yes.
So anyway, it's a powerful scene. Jesse, any thoughts on this before we move forward?
No, I really loved this scene, and it's nice. It's nice to see two of the small folk kind of relate to each other dealing with this. Because it's very funny, because when I think you talked with Kim about this last episode, but you mentioned in our very first recording together of like, oh, it's nice to see a show that doesn't involve royal bloodlines. And I got an email. I got an email from a listener who emailed me after that episode. It was like, I had to go and watch the video version of the podcast just because I needed to see your and Kim's face at that moment.
Yes,
it was very funny.
You guys did a good job of holding it in. Silly me trying to assume that there'd be a Game of Thrones show without royal bloodlines. That was a huge miscalculation on my part. Boy, is my face red.
But this is a very sweet scene because it is like them getting to sort of react and being like, yeah, it kind of sucks that we have to deal with this. And the two other moments that I want to call out is and it's kind of the same moment, is when Dunk asks like, how much do you want for the shield, and he sort of pauses and says a copper. And I like that because it's an acknowledgement of the fact that the armorer knows that Dunk doesn't want to just get charity. Like Dunk is not someone to just accept charity. And I think there's a sort of thinking on the armorer's part of like, I'll make you pay for it so that at least it feels like you are paying your debts and you're not like, you don't owe anyone, especially if you're going to die soon. You're not going to owe me a thing. And I think that's a sweet kind of thing on his part in a weird way. And also the book, I was saying earlier that this episode is so book accurate for the most part, right down to when he sort of pauses and strokes his beard and says a copper at the end of that scene. That's in the book, the pausing to stroke his beard moment. So like that's how book accurate this episode kind of gets, which I think is nice.
Great points, Jesse. Well, let's talk about what happens at the very end of the episode. So the next morning, Egg has gathered several knights to fight on behalf of Dunk, including Lord Ashford, which is a surprise to me because I just assume anyone who's going to be fighting in this could die. That's kind of my assumption. And I'm afraid because many of the characters we've met are pretty cool. You know, I don't want any of these people to die. So I'm a little bummed Lord Ashford's in the mix. But even with Stefan, they only have 6 knights. By the way, there's a little bit of foreshadowing when Dunk says, wow, I can't believe Stefan got me all these knights. And Lord Ashford says, Stefan? What are you talking about? It was Egg that brought all the knights. And of course, later we learn that Stefan betrays them for a lordship title. He's like, hey, actually, sorry, you actually only have 5 knights.
And just to correct you, are you saying, when you say Lord Ashford, do you mean Lionel Baratheon?
That's what I meant. Sorry. Yeah,
just want to make
I got the mix up. Lionel Baratheon. I apologize. This is what happens when Kim is not writing when I'm in charge of writing the notes, not Kim.
I was just saying, Baratheon's my boy. I have to say
the guy with the crown and who's drunk at the party. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Lord Ashford is the guy who's like doing the games, running the games. I'm sorry about that. No. Apologies. Thank you for catching that. That's why we're doing this here.
Yeah.
So
I will say, just because I have to say it because I haven't been on the show, I love Lionel Baratheon. Like he's a character in the book, but they give him such character in this show, and every time he shows up, I literally go, my boy is on screen.
Yes. So. And he's great in this episode as well.
Yes.
Anyway, Stefan betrays him for a lordship title, and Raymond is not happy about that. And asks Dunk to knight him to take his cousin's place. Dunk can't bring himself to do so. Interesting. And then so Lionel Baratheon steps in. Apparently, any knight can make a knight. It's like vampire rules, right? Like anyone, you can just make one. It's actually kind of shocking that there aren't more of them walking around. If anyone can just make one.
Yeah, just doing the whole like I just made everyone a knight. You know, that sort of.
Is there any sense of in the books of what the criteria are for a knight to make another person a knight, and you know, it basically is this kind of last minute knighting looked down on in any way? Is it like normal that you would do that in this situation? Do you have any sense of that?
It's not necessarily looked down upon. I mean, the idea, and it kind of mirrors a real world sort of knighting, is that you only want to knight somebody who you think would live up and has earned that title. Would live up to and has earned that title. So it's kind of looked down upon if like a knight goes around and just starts making everyone knights and sort of does it indiscriminately. Like that would be looked down upon.
What's to stop that from happening though? There's
technically nothing. Technically nothing other than like a lot of, especially hedge knights, but like a lot of knights, they I mean, what's stopping it to happening within the nobility is they will only want people who are loyal to them, who they sort of want to fight for them. So there's like some sort of like choosing of who they want to sort of make knights as sort of like an honor that they bestow upon people that people should like work towards. So it's sort of like a way to, engender people to the nobility or the house or whatever. For hedge knights, the reason that there's not like more hedge knights just knighting everybody is a lot of hedge knights, they have to sort of work on reputation. They don't really have any like noble houses that they can sort of refer to, so they only have the reputation. And you would probably
if you start knighting riffraff,
you'd ruin.
Then you're diluting the image of hedge knights, and
exactly,
so
and your own sort of reputation within there as well. So that's probably the reason why no one just goes around knighting everybody. And as you note, and this is an interesting sort of I guess hint towards, especially this is in the book, but the show kind of makes a bigger deal out of it, that Dunk seemingly does not knight Raymond, because there's sort of an implication that Dunk doesn't actually know the words to the knighting ceremony.
Let's talk about that. Let's put a pin in that for the end of the episode. But certainly there has been debate about whether Dunk was actually knighted by Sir Arlen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's evidence that goes into one camp, right? And there's evidence that goes into the other camp. So, as an example, evidence that goes into the he actually was knighted. Dunk seems like an honest person and overall very honorable. Mm-hmm. And he would not build his life on a lie, right? That's, evidence in the other camp doesn't knight Raymond because he seems like he doesn't know what he's doing. So it's like, okay, well, that's of concern. I will say the way the show filmed the knighting was very cool, like with this ultra slow motion and the tight close-up shot of Raymond and all that stuff. Loved all that. And it gave the event its appropriate level of gravitas, I would say.
In the name of the warrior.
All right, so even with Raymond, they still only have 6 knights. And all seems lost because apparently if they don't have 7, they lose by default. So anyway, Dunk learns that without 7 knights, he loses by default. So he tries giving a massive speech to the crowd on horseback to motivate someone to join him. Because he's like, I was defending the innocent. That's what I was doing. He's doing his Braveheart speech, his Aragorn speech. And somebody rises from the audience and you think, oh my God, who is this? Is this a guy I'm supposed to know? And then he just lets out a massive wet fart. To kind of show what he thinks of Dunk's speech. Every episode has had some kind of bodily function humor. So that was this episode's. Yeah. But anyway,
I will say that is a slight change from the book as well. Yeah. In the book, Dunk does make this speech, but he calls out specific knights who turn him down. Like he says, we fought for you at this battle or whatever. You should fight for me. And the guy's like, nah, not doing that. No, sorry, bro. So, slight change in the book. There's no farting in the book.
Oh yeah, so people just like decline, but they don't fart. They don't fart.
Yes.
Felt bad for the guy sitting behind the fart. So,
right. Anyway. It's like, man, come on.
But just when it seems like all is lost, Baelor, the heir to the Iron Throne, comes in and joins Dunk's side, and that Game of Thrones theme music starts playing.
Yes.
And it is so good. And, I first of all, it felt like a kind of a last minute decision, but Baelor was all suited up already. So I guess he was just ready to go in case.
It's like, he's probably like hiding right outside the door, being like, is it going to do it now?
Does he have 7? Does he have 7? Oh, okay. I don't need to go. So Baelor joins in the fight, and Maekar is very unhappy. He says, this man laid his hands on my kid, and he says, he was defending the innocent. That's what knights do. And and Dunk can like barely comprehend what is going on. He's in disbelief. It's a wonderful performance by Peter Claffey. I have more to say about it, but Jesse, what was your reaction? Like, did you expect, is this what's in the books? Did you expect this? Like, what was your reaction to this?
This is in the books very much so. This is this exact payoff. But I have to say, like, this moment was, we've already alluded to it, but this was so cool. Like, as soon as that Game of Thrones theme song goes off, I was like, oh yeah, let's freaking go. I was so down for all of it. And it's such a good payoff to the very first episode, right? Where we
Yes.
have the sort of building up of the theme song, and then Dunk, I mean, that very just now infamous sort of shitting scene from the
Right.
first episode. And this seems like an echo of that, of like, no, this is the heroic moment of like the royal bloodline Targaryen coming in and being the heroic knight to save Dunk. It's such a really good payoff to all of that, and certainly we'll probably have more payoffs down in the rest of the story, but I just think it's such a good echo of that. It was so well done.
Yeah. I have a couple things to say about this.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I have to say, this moment of the show like really kind of messed me up a little bit in a good way, because I had watched Jessie Earl's YouTube video
Mm-hmm.
over at her YouTube channel, Jessie Gender, which I'd strongly recommend people check out. And it's a very earnest video essay about the earnestness of the show, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Again, the title of the video is "Cynical Art is Killing Our Ability to Imagine Hopeful Futures," and Jesse does a wonderful job tying in what's going on in the show, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and art in general, and the kind of postmodern cynical commentary that a lot of self-referential comedy that a lot of art seems to want to take. And in that environment, it is very refreshing to have a show that is very earnest about what is good and fair and noble, and that is what A Night of the Seven Kingdoms has been. So I watched that video essay, which is great, and it's about an hour long, and I'd recommend it to anyone.
Which, thank you, by the way, I appreciate the kind words. Thank you.
And then I get to this moment in the show, and then that Game of Thrones music fires up, and it's happening with this character who, by the way, I've already described as being extremely dignified and honorable and just like a very even-handed, fair individual on the show itself, coming in and doing a very heroic thing that who knows what the implications are. It's probably very embarrassing for the family. You know, like it may have like royal like it might be a scandal in the royal kingdom or whatever that he's doing anything like this, but he's doing the right thing. And it just, it made me think, you know, maybe there can be goodness in this world. for a second, right? When that music, the triumphant music comes on, and this guy comes in, and Dunk is so inspired by it, and it's like, and having watched that video essay and like watching this episode is just like, oh man, I'm feeling it in a really intense way. So
it's a nice recoding of the theme song. I mean, something I talk about in that video is how when the Game of Thrones theme song first comes on in the first episode of the show, we are kind of made to think about like the sort of franchise machinery that's been going on with Game of Thrones, especially given the fact that the theme song was used not only for Game of Thrones but House of the Dragon as well. And so the show is sort of setting us up to like, oh, we're going to hear that theme song again as the theme song of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and so you're thinking like, oh, this is just the franchise brand that we're sort of putting on this, and it makes you think of that cynical thing, and it kind of makes you think of the Game of Thrones theme song in a very cynical way of like, oh, this thing that like I remember being something I would be so excited for when I would sit down with my friends back in college to watch an episode of Game of Thrones has now become this sort of like cynical brand identity. And what I like about it coming back here is it takes it back and sort of reclaims it in an earnest way of like, oh no, this song is about like the heroic things, and changes it from being the cynical brand identity franchise thing into something very earnest and getting you excited. So just it's just so, I think it's just so smartly done, and I think really utilizes like filmmaking to its fullest, which includes like music and context and history, and both within the universe of the show, but within our understanding of what this show sits within in this moment in our current media landscape. So it's just a very, very smart utilization of it, and I really loved it. So
Agreed. Same. Love the very final moments. I mean, this is how much I liked it. Is I followed the director of the episode on Instagram so I could message her and say like, "Hey, love this episode." But just the final moment when he kind of like he spurs his horse and he's like ready to go into battle, and then smash cut to credits and we don't know what happens. I want to say one last thing about the music of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms episode 4, which is the episode concludes with the classic Game of Thrones music. It's this very we've heard many different arrangements of the track before. This is a kind of slow rhythmic version of it, and I'm listening to it and I'm so inspired just by that, and I'm sitting there as the credits roll, and then I'm listening to the music, and then all of a sudden, as I'm listening to the music, the Night of the Seven Kingdoms motifs roll in to the song and become interweaving with the Game of Thrones theme song in a way that has never taken place on the show up to this point. And I'm just like, holy shit. Like they took the Game of Thrones music, they recontextualized it, and then they're bringing in the Night of the Seven Kingdoms and combining them in this beautiful way that I was completely emotionally unprepared for. Anyway, it was beautiful.
Oh yeah, I'm waiting for that track to drop on Spotify. It's gonna go.
I went immediately to Apple Music to go, can I listen? It's not there yet.
Yeah.
So instead, I'm just rewatching the end of the episode so I can listen to the music. But yeah, what an ending! Can't wait. Even if the show ended here, it's not going to. There's 2 more episodes, but like, if it ended here, I'd be like, okay, that's pretty unsatisfying, but that was an amazing episode, and I can't wait until the next episode. I really, really want to see what happens next, and I'm really afraid of the lives of these characters who I think have been many of whom have been built up to be quite beloved, right? Like it's like, oh, I actually care about the fates of even these random guys. Okay, on that note,
yes,
let's talk about who are the 6 knights, by the way, at this point.
Yes, so the 6 knights that are with Dunk is we have Prince
seven, I guess, including.
Well, yeah, Baelor, 7 total, including Dunk. We have Prince Baelor, who we got at the end, who just came in and is obviously sort of the heir to the throne. We have Sir Raymond Fossaway, who was just knighted in that scene. We have Lionel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm, my boy, my beautiful boy, who I love to death. And then the other ones that we got that are sort of gotten a little less screen time is we have Robin Riesling.
Sir Robin Adair, the king's faithful servant. But when the crown goes against the gods, Sir Robin goes against the crown.
Who is the sort of mad warrior that we sort of got. I think he is probably the most sort of very clearly we see the hand of the author with his character introduction. I think the most like he just sort of shows up at the end of or at the beginning of episode 3, and then
he's just randomly in the field with Egg.
Yeah.
I didn't even recognize him but was he there in the background in the show? Yeah.
Yeah, Robin Riesling. So he was in episode 3. He was the guy.
No, I'm saying, was he like, we see kind of Egg shows up with a bunch of folks. I don't remember seeing that guy there.
He no, he does. He speaks to Dunk at one point. He says, I think his line is, mad. Like he said something along the lines of madness. Usually, I serve the lords, but when the lords go against the gods, I serve the madness serves the gods. Got it. He worded that. So that's the sort of motivation. Is like I have a higher calling to the gods. Over the lords here, and that's sort of his justification for joining Dunk. And then the other 2 that we get are Sir Humphrey Harding and Sir Humphrey Beesbury, who we have seen in the show already. So earlier, I think it's episode 2, when we were seeing the tournament, the actual like Lancing tournament, we had the 2 folks sort of going against each other numerous times. That was the 2 Humphreys. And in the book, I don't think we get it sort of mentioned in here. It's like called the Battle of the Humphreys, because they're both named Humphrey, just different houses. So we've seen both of them. And Humphrey Harding was the one who won that. And then we saw him again last episode, in episode 3, because he was the one who Prince Arion killed the horse of. And then the horse fell on top of him. And I think he even says here
Oh,
in
right. And so that's why his leg is all messed up. But he can,
Yes.
as long as he can ride the horse, he can be okay. Okay, yeah,
Yes.
gotcha.
Yes.
All right.
So those are our combatants. So
Got it. And do you know it's not as clear who is on the Arion side, right?
yes. So we have Sir Stefan Fossaway,
Yes.
the little punk
traitor.
punk traitor. Which, by the way, I also want to note too. He had really beautiful armor, that sort of apple armor that he
Yes.
has on. It was everyone's armor is really gorgeous, but his in
Yes.
particular was very beautiful. Shout out to the costuming team. We have Prince Darion, who is the one who sort of lied about Dunk and says like, "Hey, just bonk me on the head and I'll sort of keel over." Prince Arion, who's the one who accused him. Prince Maekar Targaryen, who is Egg's father. Then we have the three King's Guards.
Right.
So we have Sir Donald of Duskendale, Sir William Wydell, and Sir Roland Craighall. Probably, I think.
Got it. Yeah, and then I think Darren mentions the Kingsguard are going to be there. At least the only three of them that are here are going to be there, right? So it's like those three ones.
Yes.
They're the ones that are going to be there. Yeah.
Yes. So those are the other three.
All right. Seems like a pretty unbalanced fight so far.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really worried about, like, my guess is because there's multiple Dunk and Egg novellas, and this show depicts them meeting for the first time. So the other ones aren't prequels. My guess is Dunk and Egg are going to survive.
They could die. That's dumb. Shush.
My guess is Dunk and Egg will survive, but literally in my mind, like anyone else, his life is at stake, and I don't want any of them to die. So we'll see. But I expect someone will die. That's at least one person will die. That's my guess. And so I'm a little bit bummed about that, but we will see. Anyway, awesome episode. Episode. Before we move on, Jessie Earl, you want to let people know where they can find more of your work on the internet this week?
Yes. Big thing is you can find me at Jessie Gender, which David has been very kind to shout out, so I won't say too much about it, but thank you for all the kind words on that. And then the other thing I'll just mention is I have my own podcast called the Frack This Podcast, which is a Battlestar Galactica rewatch podcast, and we're sort of going through and talking about that show that sadly does not have any resonance whatsoever today with politics today. And so we sort of talk about it from that angle. So you can check me out there, and then all the social medias, Blue Sky, Instagram, all those things. So,
all right, Jessie, let's talk about a couple of topics, pieces of feedback, reactions that we've gotten to recent episodes of this podcast. By the way, we did receive this note over at youtube.com/@decodingtv. Paracarion writes in, unfortunately, the big reveal of the episode didn't land at all for me because I made the grave mistake of simply Googling the name of the show after episode 1. I was incredibly frustrated to find that the Wikipedia page preview in a Google states that he is Aegon Egg Targaryen. I didn't even need to click on the page to have it spoiled for me. So thanks to whatever pedant of a Wikipedia editor decided that was cool to do.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. Yeah.
I mean, I'm surprised that more people haven't been spoiled.
Yeah.
Like it's actually like pretty great that so many people were not spoiled, given like how big of a plot point it is.
I mean, it was something that I even knew before I even read the book. Like that was a thing that was like the selling point of it to me, which is like, oh, it's Dunk, some random hedge knight, and one of the Targaryens. That was like how the book was pitched to me when I first heard about it. As I was, I think this is way back in college that I was reading the Game of Thrones books, and someone said, oh, you should read these novellas that he has. So,
all right, Marshall writes into youtube.com. Marshall Kutin 3043 writes into youtube.com/@decodingtv. I'd be curious to hear Dave's opinion as a non-book reader on how this show stacks up against Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon for him. For me, a book reader, this show is clearly the most faithful adaptation of the books, but that doesn't automatically lead me to be more excited for next week's episodes. For me personally, the wait for new episodes of Dragon or Thrones was much more excruciating, even near the end of Thrones when that excitement turned into a sick curiosity to see how they're going to crash land my favorite series, end quote. Here are my thoughts on A Night of the Seven Kingdoms as a non-book reader. I think that, in my estimation, the reach of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, the TV shows, exceeds their grasp.
Mm-hmm.
They are telling stories that are much more ambitious than are possible in the scheduled time they have allotted.
Mm-hmm.
Which is to say, I mean, we talked about this a lot on A Cast of Kings too, of like how season 1 of House of the Dragon felt like it should have been 2 seasons. Like that, they got
Yes.
rid of the young versions of those characters so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably because they didn't know if there was going to be a season 2. They didn't know if it was going to succeed. Of course, it was a huge hit, but and now we have these interminable waits between seasons, right? Like 2 to 3 years between seasons, and uh those shows, and especially Game of Thrones towards the end, just felt like they had too much story for what was physically possible in the constraints of an HBO original series that has 6 to 10 to 12 episodes every 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, as a non-book reader, it ends up feeling like we touch upon all these characters that we don't ever get to fully explore. And they're still great shows. They're still like wonderful moments, incredible moments of grandeur and power, and great sequences and thought-provoking themes. But they ultimately feel a little bit half-baked to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm specifically, just to be specific, I'm specifically talking about Game of Thrones towards the end and House of the Dragon seasons 1 and 2. That's what I'm talking about. Not bad shows, although Game of Thrones season, towards the end, pretty rough. House of Dragon 1 and 2, still great show. Not saying it's not a great show, but like ultimately feels like it has more story that I'm only just glimpsing the surface. Kind of like watching a Harry Potter movie or something like that. It's like you're only getting a little taste of what this world is actually supposed to be. Night of the Seven Kingdoms has a far more narrow scope. It's a far more like contained story. And so as a result, I feel like I'm getting a complete vision of what this is supposed to be. I feel like this is the story that they were trying to tell with this book or novella or whatever it was. And for that reason, feels a lot more satisfying. Now, I will say that it is odd for the first 3 episodes of the show to set up this tournament that I just don't think we're going to have time to see any meaningful amount of.
Yeah.
Like, because the whole time I'm like, oh, how's the tournament going to play out? And oh, they're doing sports betting on the tournament, and like, what's that going to be like? And there's literally 2 episodes left, so 1 hour of episode, and I'm going to guess at least a third of the next episode is dedicated to whatever happens with this trial of 7. So then you only have 1.5 episodes dedicated to the tournament. Like, if that even is going to be a part of the story at all, which I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little odd to me. But other than that, like, I feel like, oh, I'm going to get a full satisfying story, and like I'm getting an appropriate amount of all these characters, and that feels pretty great. So is it my favorite of the shows? I don't know. Like, I would say it doesn't have as high highs as the other shows, but it is extremely consistent, and it feels like a complete vision that I'm witnessing, which feels quite different qualitatively than watching those other shows. Okay.
Yeah.
Those are my thoughts as a non-book reader. All that said, Jesse, I'm curious how you would compare Night of the Seven Kingdoms to Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon.
Well, I mean, I would agree with you completely. And I think what's interesting is, especially this franchise, as we've seen throughout the years, it has had such an interesting relationship with its source material in so many ways.
Yeah.
Because the original Game of Thrones show, we had the 5 books at that point. And when the show stuck to those 5 books, it was fairly well received. And the moments where it did sort of strike out away from the books here and there were usually to sort of fill in some perspectives that we didn't get to see in the book that added some new depth to it. I think of like the scene between Cersei and Robert Baratheon back in season 1, which is such a well-loved scene that they only added to fill out the episode that was not in the books at all, because we don't get either of those 2 characters' perspectives at that point in the books.
Or the character of Raw is a show invention that everyone loved. I'm just joking.
But like for
a lot of people hated that character.
Oh yeah,
including John Robinson.
Yes. But for the most part, like that was well handled. And then when they lost the books as sort of the backing, and they just sort of had the outline of whatever George R. R. Martin sort of told them was going to happen. And then clearly the D&D wanted to go and, do their Star Wars or Netflix deal. They sort of like ran everything to sort of get to the end.
At least we got a trilogy of Star Wars movies out of that, right?
that great trilogy that was
the great
definitely
D&D Star Wars movies that everyone waited for and that we definitely got and that were made and shown in theaters.
And just everyone were as most Star Wars media is just universally beloved by everyone. Oh God.
Good times.
Yeah,
Good
the
times.
alternate universe where that happened. But yeah, so and that's where like sort of things went off the rails. And then we get to House of the Dragon, which I think is in many ways trying to recapture the glory days of Game of Thrones in terms of just what the style of show that it's doing.
Yes.
And I think it does so, I think, fairly successfully, obviously with criticisms that we've had, especially given the strikes that sort of affected the end of season 2. But also has an interesting relationship with the books in that the book is a much more it's having a much more interesting textual conversation with the book because the book is just a history book essentially, and we're made to question the validity of it, whereas the show's kind of presenting a more this is what actually happened. This is an objective reality to a degree, versus the subjectivity of the book, which I think is like interesting conversation for the show to have, and it gives the show more room to play within the outline and have an interesting sort of conversation with the source material. And I kind of like that, actually. I really kind of like that. But the show itself is very much like, we're trying to do Game of Thrones again.
Yeah.
And this show is clearly evoking, as we talked about in this episode, clearly evoking the Game of Thrones franchise machinery, but is doing its own thing and also has such a clear arc to it. Like, it is so obvious that this show has a full story that it's drawing from, so that when it lays something down in episode 1, we know it's going to have some level of payoff within this season by episode 4, 5, or 6. Like, we can generally trust that because the writers can kind of look at the full story of, like, this season is just the first novella, and sure, there's probably little hints and stuff to, other stories. But we sort of get the sense like there's a full story being told here. They'll have a beginning, middle, and end. And if the show never gets picked up for seasons 2 or 3 and doesn't adapt the other novellas, we'll still feel like some level of satisfaction where this ends. I think that benefits it really, really well in a way that the original Game of Thrones did not have, where it's sort of like setting up stuff that like may or may not get payoff. They don't really know. We don't really exactly know where we're going.
That literally has not been paid off yet because of the books don't exist yet. Right?
Exactly.
So,
I really think all I'll say is, just to end it out, is just I personally, we could argue about whether or not it's the best thing in the Game of Thrones franchise. What I will say is I think this is the show, and I've talked about this in my own video, I think it's the show that really meets the moment of what we kind of need right now from a show like this. And I think it benefits from that in a really strong way that the other shows have not.
Yeah, I wanted to recap my thoughts and say that the highs are not as high, but the lows are not as low, and it is overall more consistent throughout, in my opinion, than most of the other Game of Thrones things.
Yes.
So those are our thoughts. Let us know what you think at acastofkings@gmail.com. One last email I wanted to mention. And so, Jesse, we have talked about all season about whether we are supposed to believe that Dunk was actually knighted. And I will say, and it is Kim's position, which I believe, and I'm curious if you agree with it. I think you do agree with it, is that we are not supposed to know for sure. That is Kim's position. You said it on the first episode as well.
Yes, I agree.
We were together.
So I'll at least note, I think you and one of the listeners who emailed in, I think on episode 2, I think you've convinced me that I think we're not supposed to know, but I've now fallen on the side of he probably didn't get knighted.
Right.
He's probably where I'm
like
at.
when I watched the show, my assumption was that he did not get knighted. That was like what I went into it as. Then I talked to both of you, and you seem to have this position that we're not supposed to know, and I'm like, oh, interesting. But several people have written in with like evidence that he was not supposed to be knighted, and that includes Jesse present company excluded, writing into a castofkings@gmail.com says, in regards to Dunk, I do not think he was knighted. In the book, when he finds out that Egg is Aegon, he says he can't blame him because he's also been disingenuous about who he is. So now, was he just speaking generically about like at one point I have lied, or was he speaking about he really hasn't? And then Jesse also points out that when Raymond is asked to be knighted by Dunk, he hesitates because he knows he's not a proper knight. End quote. Now, Jesse, I am curious. Like, do you have any insight? And if you don't, it's okay. We can cover this next week. But like, do you have any insight as to like how the book describes Dunk's decision to not knight Raymond in this episode? Like, in the show, he just seems very in the show, it could go either way. Maybe he doesn't know the words. Maybe it's because he's flustered because he's not a knight and he doesn't want to lie about knighting someone else. Unclear why Dunk doesn't knight Raymond. In the book, is it any more clear?
No, in the book, it is not more clear. You don't get a look inside his head as to why. And the same moment happens where he's sort of like sitting there pausing over it and sort of makes the excuse of like, I don't want you to be in danger, which you could take on its face as true or not. And then he sort of gets called away, and it's Sir Lionel who is the one to do the knighting in the book as well. So it's played up fairly close to the book, and we don't get any more insight into it.
Yeah. So then Jesse in the email is kind of imposing her own reading of what occurred.
Yes.
In the book, right?
Yes.
But she, okay. So that said, Jessie Earl, do you have any further like what do you make of the comment about Dunk related with Egg because he also knew what it was like to deceive someone? Like, by the way, none of those examples that are in the book are in the show, right? Like of like, I know what it's like to deceive someone. I know like I deceive someone to Egg, so you don't need to feel too bad. None of that's in the show. That's all book stuff.
Yes.
But Jesse, it seems like you didn't necessarily, at least on first blush, find it persuasive that meant he was not knighted, correct?
Well, I think it is important. What I will argue is I when we first started the show, I was on the side of like I thought he had been knighted because I sort of trusted Dunk's character.
Right. Yeah, he's a noble person.
He's a noble person.
And I think in the show depiction of him is what you're describing.
Yes,
right?
yes. What I will ultimately end up saying though is I think it all but says that he did not get knighted. He was not actually knighted, and he has been lying. I think the book kind of implies that, but I think it is very important that the book never confirms that. And I think that the lack of confirmation of that sense of doubt that we're supposed to have of like maybe he is actually telling the truth, but we never know for sure, is I think an important part of understanding kind of his character, because it kind of speaks thematically to him as like him doubting whether or not he is good enough to be a knight. And there can be a textual reason of him being like, I never was actually knighted, so I don't have the formal sort of institutional backing of like being an official knight. But at the end of the day, what we end up supposed to go with is it doesn't matter. He in many ways embodies the nobility and the spirit of what it means to be a knight, and maybe that's all that matters. And all of this pomp and circumstance, right down to like the lords and ladies of Westeros, like all of this nonsense of like highborn versus lowborn, these people are more valuable than you are because you are one of the small folk, is all nonsense. And at the end of the day, it just matters how we treat each other. And it's such an interesting look at this idea of like class doesn't matter really. Like at the end of the day, what do we stand for? And that's more important. I think that's a really beautiful message. It's a message that I think is meeting the moment of where we're at right now in our society, where we're looking at, without getting too political, we're looking at what's happening right now and the people in charge of our society failing us in many ways, and how we as communities come together to care for each other. And I think that's kind of the ultimate point and thematic of all of this, of all the Dunk and Egg stories, is really just exploring different ways of like, Dunk may not be the knight that we think of when we think of like the heroes of old and the knights who come out and ride to save everybody. But in many ways, in his own small way, he embodies those values more. And so I think that the seed of doubt that we're left with is important, that we don't get a confirmed textual answer, even though we probably can guess what the actual answer is, because at the end of the day, we're supposed to be like, yes, we doubt that, But does the institutional, like, you got officially knighted matter in the end? I think there's the thing the book comes down on is no, it doesn't.
The real knighthood
It was the friends
we made along the way. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.